Jim Jordan just dropped an absolute bombshell on the sham that was the Biden DOJ. And he's not just coming with allegations. He's got irrefutable proof. You guys have got to check this out.
Tell us who planted the pipe bombs on January 6th. They can never tell us who leaked the Dobbs opinion, and they can never tell us who put cocaine at the White House. But they sure had time for a lot of other things. October 2nd, 2021, they set up a snitch line to report moms and dads who have the nerve to show up at a school board meeting and advocate for their son or daughter. On September 23rd, 2022, 10 unmarked cars pull up to Mark Houck's home, arrest him in front of his wife and 7 children. And what did he do wrong? What did he do wrong? Praying in front of an abortion clinic. And when some crazy guy comes up and starts yelling obscenities in his kid's face, he makes sure he deals with that guy. He went to court. The jury found him not guilty. On November 18th, 2022, the chairman talked about this. Actually before that, summer of 2022, raid on President Trump's home. President Trump's attorney said, you can come. They were working with him. No, we got to do a raid. We had actually Mr. Stephen D'Antuono, head of the Washington field office, tell us how wrong that was, how they broke all kinds of protocol. 2 months later, Mr. Garland appoints Jack Smith as special prosecutor. And as the chairman pointed out in his opening statement, the lead prosecutor, Jay Bratt, used the promise of a judgeship to try to pressure one of the defendant's lawyers. You're not allowed to do that. We're going to talk to Mr. Bratt at some point in this committee. We'll have him in for a deposition. January 23rd, 2023, FBI Richmond field office issues a memorandum where it says, if you're a pro-life Catholic, you might be a domestic violent extremist. Can't tell us who put cocaine at the White House, but you can call Catholics extremists. Spring of 2023, 2 brave whistleblowers come forward and tell us about the sweetheart deal that David Weiss was trying to do for Hunter Biden. Of course, those guys' reward for coming forward as good, brave whistleblowers was to have their security clearances taken from them and be retaliated against. 6:01 a.m., March 19th, 2024, Brian Malinowski, Little Rock, Arkansas, highest paid official in the Little Rock government, runs the Bill and Hillary Clinton Airport. 6:01, all these folks show up in the morning. First thing they do is put tape on the doorbell cam, and they're coming after Mr. Malinowski, a warrant to search his home because they believed he had sold 6 guns that he wasn't supposed to sell. 6:01, tape on the doorbell cam. 53 seconds later, Brian Malinowski shot in the head, later dies. They could have handled that. So, the SWAT team and everything else, just talk to his lawyers. You could have, all kinds of ways you could have handled that to avoid the terrible outcome. We had Brian Malinowski's spouse here last Congress. His lawyer testified. Tragic story because of this Justice Department, the previous Justice Department, the way they handled things. And don't forget, December 12, 2024, when the Inspector General told us about the 26 confidential human sources who were there on January 6, 2021. 17 went in restricted space, which they were not authorized to do. 4 went in the Capitol, which they were not authorized to do. None of them were charged. 2 of the 4 who went in the Capitol were asked to be there by the FBI. We got all kinds of questions about that incident, about those confidential human sources, all kinds of questions we want answered. Now, thank goodness, and the chairman referenced this as well, thank goodness Pam Bondi, Todd Blanche, Kash Patel, Dan Bongino are now going to be running the Justice Department, where we won't have this kind of ridiculous focus on agencies being turned on the very people they're supposed to serve. We sent 7 subpoenas today. 7 subpoenas that we sent asking for information about all these issues. We want everything you got so the American people have answers. Maybe it's not as bad as I think, but one thing I've learned in my time in Congress with these investigations, every single time, the only thing we get wrong is it's always worse than we thought. It is always worse than we thought. So maybe I'll be proven wrong this time, but we're going to get that information. I think the date's March 7th. They're supposed to have this information back to us. So I want to thank the chairman and the good work I know he's going to do this Congress, the great work he's done on our committee for having this hearing, taking a look back at what we saw from this ridiculous previous Justice Department and the good work I think we're going to see from the folks who are now running that critical department and agency.
Not only was the Biden DOJ actively attacking people who supported Donald Trump and people who were considered to be Republican leaning, but they actively attacked who we chose as our Republican nominee as Donald Trump. When they did that raid at Mar-a-Lago, that was so over the top, it was almost comical because they knew exactly what they were doing. Donald Trump and his team were in complete contact with the White House. They were willing to do whatever it took just to please them. They're not trying to cause any trouble. But instead of just asking for the documents back, they decided to raid his Mar-a-Lago mansion at 5 o'clock in the morning, and it just so happens all the TV cameras were there to document the whole entire thing. It sounds kind of familiar to exactly what happened to Donald Trump's good friend, Roger Stone. Somehow, these news organizations knew just where to be at 5 o'clock in the morning outside these people's houses. This has nothing to do with the documents. This has to do with trying to humiliate and embarrass these people on national television. It's exactly what happened when they tried to arrest Trump in August of 2024, and he had that iconic mugshot. That face that he made was a face of defiance because he realized at that moment, these people are not trying to make America better. They are actively just trying to take him out because he's the only one that's representing us, the American people. That's when I realized this was the spiritual battle that we were in, because they did not just try and beat Donald Trump in the polls. They didn't just try to beat him in the election. They wanted to break his spirit. They wanted him to never even think about running again. But that backfired on them because it only motivated Trump further because he knew he was doing the right thing. And these were nasty, nasty people. And they don't belong anywhere near power, especially when it comes to the United States government.
Rucker, how long were you at the FBI?
24 years.
24 years. Distinguished career?
I'd like to think so.
I think so too. Assistant Director of the Criminal Division. That's a pretty darn important position you held. In that time at the FBI, did you ever deal with confidential human sources?
Yes.
Regular basis?
Yes.
What can you tell me? Well, let's frame it this way. 26 of them were there on January 6, 2021. And we know at least 17 of them did something they weren't authorized to do. Is that?
I wouldn't say it's atypical. I mean, informants are generally in the criminal mix, so they often find themselves in places where there are crimes taking place, yeah.
So it was okay for them to do something they weren't authorized to do on January 6th?
No. There's a process for the FBI to authorize ordinary criminal activity, and it has to be they're very structured about how they handle informants. If an SAC, a special agent in charge, authorizes ordinary criminal activity, it's going to be in the file.
And have you read the Inspector General's report on these 26 confidential human sources?
Not the entire report.
But according to the Inspector General, they were not authorized to do so. They were not authorized to enter the restricted space, certainly not authorized to go in the Capitol.
Right.
And we know 17 entered restricted space, 4 went in the Capitol. Yeah. How does it normally work? Do you think these guys were I'm just asking as an expert, 24 years, Assistant Director of the Criminal Division, you think these guys were paid for what they were involved with or what they did or what they witnessed, how they informed, whatever they did on the 6th? Do you think they were paid by the taxpayers?
By the time they're fully vetted informants, they generally are paid.
So certainly
to be where they are.
So certainly the two, or is it fair to say the two who were asked to be there by the FBI that particular day were probably on the payroll?
I would say yes.
Okay,
I think
so
that's
they
a
were
good
being paid
guess.
by the taxpayer, most likely being paid by the, well, to be fair, most likely being paid by the taxpayer, and they went, 2 of these 4 went into the Capitol who were being paid, or who were asked to be there. So they're asked to be by the FBI, likely being paid, and they did something they weren't allowed to do.
Right.
And why was it that every time Christopher Wray, the director of the FBI, came in front of the committee over the last several years, and we'd have some Republican members would ask him about any confidential, why was he so reluctant to just say, yes, they were there?
I think it was an embarrassing thing for the Bureau, for the public to know that they had that many informants on the premises.
No procedure, nothing prohibiting from him telling us. We're not asking for their names. We're not asking to identify them. Certainly, we understand that's part of your investigative techniques and tactics. But there was nothing prohibiting Christopher Wray from telling us, yeah, there were confidential human sources there that day.
There was nothing prohibiting that I know of.
But he went out of his way to make sure we couldn't get that information. And then we didn't get that information, frankly, until after the election, 4 years later. They didn't need to wait 4 years to tell us what they knew on January 7th.
Right.
Well, actually, they knew on January 6th because they asked some of these people to be there.
It's pretty extraordinary because my mind goes to prevention. If they had that many informants out there, what were they doing and why weren't they reporting on what was going on ahead of time, and why didn't the FBI take steps to prevent what happened?
Because if these guys were helping actually doing what they're supposed to do, we might have prevented some of the things that took place that day is what you're saying.
Absolutely.
Yeah, okay. Mr. Fahey, is it appropriate for with the special counsel, Mr. J. Bratt, to say to a defendant's counsel to say that we didn't know you were a Trump guy, and we thought you would do the right thing, and we understand you're interested in this judge position. Is that appropriate behavior from someone in the special counsel saying to a defendant's counsel?
That would be highly inappropriate.
That is as bad as it gets, isn't it?
That would seem, I don't recall anything even remotely comparable or even hearing of anything.
But Stanley
remotely
Woodward, who this happened to.
Right, and I know it's shocking to me when I heard it, and it was only until I heard it multiple times that it was like,
One of the many things that were shocking about this special counsel, the idea that in the special counsel case in Florida, they mixed up the stuff that they got, they screwed it up and had to file with the court. Oh, the classified documents that we said Mr. Trump, that President Trump mishandled, we actually mishandled. They had to file that with the court, didn't they?
yeah, and it's sort of the irony of it all, of holding one standard to President Trump and a lower standard, not only for them, but also
one last
for
question
the
for the three of you. Why all the pre-dawn raids? What they did to Mr. Houck, what they did to Brian Malinowski. I mean, let's assume I'm not sure Brian Malinowski did anything wrong, but let's assume he did. Had 6 firearms, sold 6 firearms he wasn't supposed to sell. Why in the world would you knock on his door, have 10 cars pull up, coordinate with local police, put the tape on the doorbell cam and do what they did, which resulted in his loss of life? Why would you do that? We'll start with Mr. Breen, since you haven't answered anything yet.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Look, the outrageous thing, too, so they overdo it. And I got to tell you, I asked for body cam footage from the feds. They're not wearing the body cams. They're not on. The only people I could get was from the Pennsylvania State Police. They gave me a full video of the
Yeah, you're talking Mr. Houck. You're talking about Mark.
for
Yeah,
Mark,
in case
for
you
Mark
had.
Houck.
Understand.
So
Understand.
that you can't even figure out, what are these folks doing? You know, they tape the Ring doorbell.
Well, they did the
something
same thing.
stinks.
The point is, the consistency, and they did the same thing with Mr. Malinowski. Mr. Houck was acquitted by the jury, found not guilty by the jury. Mr. Malinowski wound up dead because he thought he was being robbed, and he defended his home and then was shot in the head and died a few hours later. It's terrible what happened. And you know the interesting thing about the Malinowski case? They were surveilling him for weeks. They were all set to go do this raid pre-dawn still the week before, and they found out he wasn't there. They were going to get the firearms. He didn't need to be there. Why in the world would you do that and jeopardize life? And of course, the worst thing happens. Mr. Swecker, would you? That's not how it's supposed to operate, is it?
No. You know, most of the time, you do a couple hours of surveillance, you get the routines down, you catch them walking out to the car when they're unaware.
You know,
maximum drama is the only thing that you could surmise.
The only explanation could be that because they followed him and they could have went to the airport where he worked, where everyone knew. It was so ridiculous.
Did you catch what he said there? They did this for maximum drama. That's all the Democrats want. Why exactly? That's anybody's guess. The sheer fact of the matter that none of the federal employees were wearing any body cams when they were doing that raid. They put the tape over the Ring camera. This is almost a perfect metaphor of the Biden administration where there was no transparency to the American people. Everything was behind closed doors, and that we don't have the right to know what happens or what they're doing because everything happens in the shadows. That's not the way the federal government should operate. It's no wonder that 72% of people don't trust their federal institutions. If you ask me, the federal government has been corrupted for decades because what happened on January 6th, I feel was set up from the very beginning. Donald Trump wanted 10,000 National Guard troops there just in case anything ever happened so that there would be not a problem whatsoever. What do Nancy Pelosi and the Democrats do? They reject that appeal. They don't want the National Guard troops because they want drama. They want chaos. They want maximum drama at all times. That's all they're about. So they get better ratings, so that the Republicans are crazy, crazy people. Anybody who supports Trump is a radicalist and wants to overthrow the country. That's not true. If there's anybody who's on the fence about whether they're Democrat or Republican, they can't support the right because they're crazy. They want to overthrow America. And the sad fact of the matter is, this strategy has worked for years and years and years. It's only in the last year or two when people are starting to wake up, the dawn of podcasts, the dawn of X run by Elon Musk. We have the free flow of information and people are realizing that they've been lied to for years. These people are sick and demented in the head. I'll tell you what, Biden, Merrick Garland, Anthony Fauci, all these people need to have their day in court, because until that happens, the American people are never going to trust that there is equal balance of justice in this country. If this were you or I that did these acts, we would be locked away in Guantanamo Bay and never see the light of day ever again. I'll tell you what though, Jim Jordan is one of the good ones. He is not afraid to tackle any tough subject, and he will bring the heat no matter who he's talking to. But yeah, let me know your thoughts on this down below. Why do you think they did that raid for the guns when he was there? And why do you think there were no cameras involved? And also, who would you like to see have their day in court? Let me know, I'd love to hear that. And if you enjoyed, make sure to smash that like, comment, subscribe, and wish you guys nothing but the best. Till next time.